All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. My name is James Kleinick. I'm here with A Man's Take with Springs in the Desert. This is episode 1. Really excited to get this podcast going. With me today, I got Phil. You say it's Huneck, right?
It is Huneck. That is correct.
Awesome. Well, it's great to get to visit with you, Phil.
Absolutely.
Real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? Yeah, go.
So as you said, my name is Phil Huneck. Me and my wife have been married for 5 years. We live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is like 2 hours north of Indianapolis. We bought a house 2 years ago. We have a dog named Tyler. I work for a window and door manufacturing company. I do all their IT work. I found it enjoyable. Couple of hobbies, I guess. Kind of the IT background, a little nerdy. So I got pretty into like trading card games.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah, got pretty nerdy.
What kind of games?
Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, okay.
But I kind of got into that recently because it gets pretty expensive for pieces of cardboard.
Oh yeah. My brother and I got really into Settlers of Catan. We got like 50 million expansion packs, and board games are a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me and my brother played Settlers of Catan like 100 times in one summer. So
I believe it. It's kind of addictive.
Yep.
It also brings out the worst in me, I find. Kind of joking around with Allie a little bit, but I don't think we can play together anymore. It always ends miserably. It's the worst, but it's so much fun.
It's not. My brother, another background. My brother's a Catholic priest.
That's awesome.
Catholic priests can be pretty competitive too when it comes to Catan. So there has been fights.
That's awesome. So I didn't even realize that. So when was your brother ordained?
So my brother, his name is Father David Huneck, and he is at St. Paul of the Cross in Columbia City, Indiana.
Okay.
And he got ordained a priest 2 years ago.
That's awesome.
And he actually just moved to a new parish this past week. So
fantastic. Is he older or younger?
He is 2.5 years older than I am, and his birthday is in 4 days.
So. That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, well, I guess you were recently, you're one of 3, right?
Correct. I also have an older sister. She's about 6.5 years older than I am.
Okay.
I'm the baby.
Yeah. Is your sister married? Do you have this, like, what's her story?
So my sister, she got married 10 years ago.
Cool.
And she has a son and a daughter, Henry and Harper. Me and my wife Stacy really enjoy them. It's great to have them around.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got an older sister and 2 younger brothers, and my sister has been married now since what was it? About 2012, I want to say, is when they got married. If I'm wrong on that, I'm going to get in big trouble. But they have 4 kids, and actually the youngest is now Allie and my goddaughter. So that's been super awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and your wife Stacy, you're both involved at Springs in the Desert. Also, Stacy's been writing for Springs in the Desert for a while. You contributed to our A Man's Take Father's Day post that we were doing on Facebook. That was a really awesome reflection you wrote for St. Joseph.
Thanks. Yeah, me and my wife really enjoy the ministry. She found it about a year ago. I believe your wife stalked her on Facebook and found her. We've been very blessed to be part of Springs in the Desert. And I really hope, like, our ultimate goal of, sharing our life and sharing our struggles is to be relatable to people. Because infertility can be like a difficult thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I feel like people don't really talk about it. And so it's a nice way for us to, not only express what we're going through, but then also, find other people to, walk with on this journey.
Man, no kidding. Yeah, I think that's super important. It does feel like whenever you're dealing with something like infertility, to your point, it's so difficult to go there that I think a lot of people don't go there. And it feels like culturally, there's so much in front of us that's so centered on kind of just comfort and entertainment, that bringing up anything that's not comfortable or entertaining, we tend to kind of avoid that in most spheres. But it's kind of a shame because it feels like some of the most real stuff that you can have with interacting with other people is kind of through this mutual sort of vulnerability where you're able to kind of, I mean, it's not vulnerability, but it's like getting in and understanding each other in a way that's more real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How did you and Allie find out about Springs in the Desert?
Allie was, so yeah, a little bit about our story. We've been married for 4 years, like y'all, right? I think you just had a 4th anniversary not that long ago.
Fifth year, so we got one up on you.
Oh yeah, you got me, like 20%, 25%, depending on how you want to look at it, I guess. But
there you go.
Yeah, so Allie and I, we found out that we were going to be dealing with infertility about a year into our marriage. And it's kind of interesting because, yeah, the issue in this case is on my side of things. So it's weird because it doesn't really feel like there's as much science out there dedicated to figuring out how to deal with male factor infertility. And I have no idea why. It's like, you know, me growing up, it's like, okay, I got bald hair and big beard, like not gonna have any trouble having kids. Like surely I got all sorts of like whatever I need there as a man. But anyway, God deals strange hands sometimes. You just kind of deal with what you got. But that said, we spent about a year really trying to just kind of come to grips with what it meant for us to be kind of in this struggle. And at the time, we live in Dallas. That's where we are right now, Dallas, Texas. Allie was working remotely down in Houston and was traveling down there once every week or every other week for just like a day. She'd stay overnight. And while she was doing that, she got plugged in down in the Houston diocese with a parish, I want to say it was a parish group or something that specifically had like an infertility sort of a support group, more or less, which is awesome because we weren't able to find anything like that specifically here in Dallas. So she kind of got plugged in with that. She started finding online resources. And then at some point, I want to say that she found her way to Springs in the Desert through some online cross-pollinating somehow. But yeah, she got plugged in with Ann and Kimberly, and then just kind of has been going with it. And yeah, at some point I was invited to start writing a couple blogs or something, and so I started writing a little bit, and then before we know it, here we are having our first podcast for Man's Take. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's pretty exciting. It's really wonderful to see God working in our lives in the most unpredictable of ways, which I think is just, yeah, I mean, it's a blessing beyond compare.
Yeah, it's very relatable.
Well, so tell me a little bit about your marriage and kind of how what's your faith life like? Like, how did you get to where you are today? What, if you kind of map your journey a little bit for us?
So growing up, both Catholic parents, went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. So I was always very much a cradle Catholic. And went to college at Purdue Fort Wayne. And while in college, I actually at another university, I got very involved in their youth ministry program or their college ministry program, and really built a lot of great relationships there. My prayer life has always been, when I was younger, I would say it was always, say your Hail Marys and say your Glory Bees. But it was more so of just like reciting, rather than actually like listening to God. About 5 years ago, my wife is a high school youth minister. I got involved with the youth ministry, and I helped lead a boys high school group with another one of my friends.
Cool.
So I really got to build relationships with these high school boys, and we would do different Bible studies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when we first started, I was like, man, I'm going to make these boys like faith life so much better. And I didn't really expect anything to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
But it really helped boost my prayer life and my spirituality. Because some of the topics, even though like they're geared towards, high school boys, like it felt very welcoming, and it felt like I actually learned some things. So then going past that, I recently, one of my friends is getting married in a couple months. So we started doing Exodus 90.
Well,
So that's really
so wait, your
been
jump into that was because your friend is getting married?
correct.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Cool.
so he's getting married, and when we started, he was getting married in exactly 91 days. So we're kicking it right off, and then day before his wedding, we get off of it, and then he gets married. So
That's fantastic. I love that.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Wow. So are you one of the groomsmen or something, or are you just a buddy jumping in?
I'm just a buddy jumping in. I'm actually gonna be an usher at their wedding,
Cool.
but it's one of my friends from high school that I've known for 10 plus years. So
That's fantastic.
try to support my friends.
I haven't ever heard anybody doing Exodus 90 for that reason specifically, but that is a beautiful way to start your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I did a little spat in Exodus 90. Did a spat? Is that what you call it? I did a thing. We Exodus 90'd me and a bunch of people. I actually had kind of two groups going, which I wouldn't advise for anybody that's considering jumping into Exodus 90. But I had a Dallas-based group, and then I kind of had a more national group, if you will. So it wound up being a lot of meetings.
I would imagine so.
But it was really cool. We did this leading into Easter this year, so that was pretty exciting. And then even since that, we've been kind of sticking with some of the day 91 things. Actually, today's probably, I think, the last of our day 91 meetings that we're going to have here for the near future. But it's been, man, I think that's just a phenomenal program. I've gotten a lot out of it. But do you want to talk about it real quick and like tell everybody what Exodus 90 is kind of about?
Absolutely. So it's actually pretty interesting because like the main office for some of the guys that are like in charge of Exodus 90 is actually in Fort Wayne.
I was about to say they're based out of Indiana, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's
So
James Baxter, I think, right?
yeah. So he's actually we're decent friends with him and his wife.
Are you really?
Yeah.
That's
So
fantastic. That's awesome.
yeah.
Cool.
So a little bit more about Exodus 90. It's more about living a very aesthetically based life,
Mhm.
and cutting out all the things that aren't going to lead you closer to Christ, while also like building up your prayer life. I guess I don't really have a very elegant way of talking about it, but the whole point is for 90 days. If you have like a vice or something you're really struggling with, you kind of try to weed it out of your life, because they say that bad habits, in order to actually get a bad habit all the way out of your life, up until like 90 days does it actually start to go away from your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And how far into the program are you at the moment?
I believe that we are on day 28.
Cool. All
so
right.
we're about a third of the way.
4 weeks in. How you feeling? How you doing?
It's definitely been a struggle. You don't really I don't really eat a lot of sweets. So that's like one of the things, is you're not supposed to eat sweets or have alcohol. But you really don't know that you missed something until you can't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt that I never wanted pancakes more in my life than when I started Exodus 90.
Yeah. So it's going well.
That's awesome.
The buddy that's actually getting married, you're supposed to have in Exodus 90 like an accountability partner. He's actually my accountability partner. So
that's
fun.
Awesome. Cool. How's that going? Well, I don't have to, you don't have to talk about your partner. That's fine. No, that's great. It's good to have a buddy to walk through with.
So there's actually 7 of us doing it. And I know all of them pretty well. So we have our meetings on Sunday nights, and we kind of get off track pretty easily because like we all know each other really well. So it's fun.
Yeah, I feel like 7's probably a perfect number for that.
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Well, why don't we? So we're going to be spending today's conversation talking mostly about prayer. So it's very apropos that we got to discuss a little bit about Exodus 90 here. But you want to join me in prayer to just kind of open up the conversation a little bit?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Good and gracious God, I want to thank you so much for the gift of all the beautiful blessings you've placed in our lives, especially being able to relate to other people who are dealing with the cross of infertility. Ask you to bless this conversation, help Phil and me to be able to come to better understand you through whatever it is that we're engaging in here today. May this ministry reach out and bless lots of men. And may we always seek to understand and to serve and to love you better. We ask this seeking the intercession of Mary as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace,
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. All right, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, so episode 1, I felt like this is an appropriate place to talk about prayer because it seems like the perfect place to start any sort of conversation, especially dealing with something as life-changing as struggles with infertility. Prayer is a great place to start. Well, let me ask you this too. So your wife is a youth minister. You've been doing some youth ministry stuff with her. Prayer life, like what does that look like for you in your life, and how have you found that what has that been for you as y'all have been kind of growing in this understanding of what it means to be dealing with infertility?
Yeah. I try to do a lot of my prayers in the morning. I have a small commute to work, and I find it very refreshing, not to really get prayer out of the way, but like to really start my morning with it. Because with work, things can get really hectic really fast. And so if I get so caught up in it and I work late, things start to snowball, and then I keep on putting it off. And I've learned if I want to get some good prayer time in, usually in the mornings when things are calm is a great time. But then also, me and Stacy, we go to daily mass fairly often. Not really of recent because of COVID going on.
Sure.
But every night we say some prayers together. We always have done an examination of conscience, I think, since the past like 3 or 4 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
So like really just think about our days and reflect on things, because you can't really work on anything that's you're struggling with in your life if you don't reflect on it.
Yeah, right.
And like just regular reflection, as long as like it's geared towards, trying to better yourself, even if you don't think it's prayer, it could ultimately, still be offering things up to Christ and God and listening. So
sure. Well, let me ask you this too. Do you consider yourself to be a morning person? Like what's your best time of the day?
I don't know. I think sometimes I wake up looking pretty fresh. But I would say I'm a mid-afternoon, 2 to 3 o'clock kind of guy.
So that's funny. That's for me. It's like by the time I hit mid-afternoon, I start declining. It's like my big struggle with prayer personally is that my best hours are usually like right after I wake up. And if I can jump in, so I work as an engineer. I do structural engineering down here in Dallas. And depending on what it is that I'm working on, sometimes I feel like if I don't just jump right into it whenever I wake up, I'm not being able to be as productive as I ought to be, because invariably I'm going to start. I don't know. I feel like I get so easily derailed in my thoughts. The minute I can get really super dialed in and focused on one thing, but the minute that I get some other distractions coming up, it's just like my Labrador when she sees a squirrel. It's just all of a sudden everything's just kind of blown out of whack. So for me, it's actually like a real struggle for me to get up and to pray, but because it's almost kind of like, but I think that for me, it's almost like looking at, Abel's gift to God, kind of at the, back in Genesis, you're looking at that. He gives God like the best of his fruits, right? And that's his sacrifice to God, and God's well pleased with it as what he gives him. Well, for me, it's like the best of my fruits is to give God the first 30 minutes, hour of my day, if I can do an hour. When I was doing Exodus 90, it was definitely an hour. I definitely probably ought to consider my time a little bit more carefully now that I've kind of gotten beyond it. But yeah, giving that first 30 minutes of the day, it requires a tremendous amount of discipline for me to do it. But then it orients my day always in the best direction. And then it does definitely sets the stage for the rest of the day.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I was
Yeah,
asking when your best time of the day was, to wonder if you were kind of dealing with it similarly, or if you, what your approach is on that.
I would say my best time of prayer is probably in the morning, definitely.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing. Like you kind of just get sucked into your day. And usually my mind is the most clear in the mornings when I first wake up.
Yeah.
But there's definitely mornings where I just totally drop the ball and I just, forget, which is fine. But you
Yeah.
definitely
Is it fine? Because I find myself always kind of, the minute that I stop praying in the mornings, and I mean, I have better days than others, right? I love watching Father Mike Schmitz on YouTube. I like to tune into him. I like to tune into Matt Fradd and some of these other guys.
absolutely.
But yeah, it's like you hear what Father Mike Schmitz has to say about this. It's like, yep, you should pray every day. Yeah, you should do it. And it's like, yeah. When I'm not doing that, it's like convicted. I should. How can I be a saintly person if I'm not giving my time to God? How can I deal with infertility in the way that I ought to be, and relating to my wife in the way that I should be, if I'm not giving myself to God every day?
Yeah. I definitely think it's important to not only work on your personal prayer life, but also if your spouse has the same beliefs, it's very important to pray with your spouse.
Yeah.
And like one thing my wife is really into is praying over people. So
That's
some
awesome.
mornings, I know she does it, but she'll like stick her hand on me and pray over me, like, hey, have a good day kind of thing. But like, when you struggle with infertility in marriage, it's not just a personal struggle. It's definitely a struggle throughout your marriage because you're both going through it and experiencing it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really salient point. By the way, I chuckle at you talking about your wife praying over you, because in one of the live Facebook events we did a while back, she was talking a little bit about that she would do that over you, and that's beautiful. By the way, it's like so wonderful to have a wife that's dialed in with you in your spirituality, to be entering into that with you.
Yeah,
Allie,
absolutely.
yeah, Allie and me, we're both a little bit more. It's interesting. We've been working a lot more on individual prayer. We probably could stand to work on praying together a little bit more. We both give each other time for it. So I mean, we have kind of, even 4 years into our marriage, it's like we're learning every day a little bit more about how to relate to each other through our prayer life. We certainly come together to pray at various times during the day. We don't as habitually make time to pray together, which, as time has been going on, I've started to realize it's more and more important. And I'm starting to realize also that, I should probably be leading us to make some time for this.
Yeah, it's especially during the summer. I feel like you just want to go outside and do things, and it's hard to carve time out.
Well, there's never a dearth of excuses to not pray, I've found. There are TV shows to watch. There's work to be done. There's food to eat. There are people to talk with on the phone. There's any number of possible excuses to throw out there. But actually, I was listening to a thing recently by Father Mike that I thought was really important, and it just kind of really hit home. And what he said was, you basically have to make time, and it is a battle, and it is a struggle. And yeah, it's like, this is something that you learn with Exodus 90, right? It's like,
Yeah,
it's not easy to give up all the things that you give up. It's not easy to dedicate time out of your week to meet up with other guys. It's not necessarily easy to check in with a guy every day. But then the benefits for that, I have found that when I make time to pray, I'm a better version of myself. I'm able to relate to my wife better. And it just feels like I'm more whole.
yeah,
I'm not.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, and let me ask you this too. So you were talking about, I mean, right now it's June 27th. So we're late June here in the United States. we're in the middle of a global pandemic that has been affecting us in various degrees kind of throughout the country. Especially kind of given the COVID situation, like, has that changed at all your prayer life relating to your wife? Have you found that kind of dealing with, has it presented any interesting considerations for dealing with infertility even? Like, how's that looked for you?
I would definitely say, so I was only not going to work for 3 weeks. Otherwise,
Right.
I've been at work because we're manufacturing, so that's considered essential. But I would definitely say during those 3 weeks, it was kind of a struggle. Just like working from home, and like usually I had time myself at work, just like quiet time.
Yeah.
But me and my wife are both working from home during those times, and that made it kind of difficult to really set aside time because there wasn't that work home life disconnect. I think that's what made it the most difficult, is all the days started to blend together. Like examination of conscience, like it felt like it was the same episode of a TV show over and over again.
And it really does come down to being disciplined. But when I'm using the Examine and meditating on the Examine, a great time to do that is like right before you go to sleep. I also find that if I'm laying down in my bed, I do a very improper Examine. It's like, all right, look, drop to my knees. Here we go. I'm going to try to actually do this. But it's a wonderful tool because it does help you to call to mind, first off, the ways that God is speaking to you on a daily basis. And then it also really allows you to kind of call to mind where you can improve for the next day.
Yeah.
It can also be very frustrating because you kind of come to thinking, oh yeah, I messed up in the same way again today.
Yeah. So definitely like the prayer life during quarantine, the aspect, like definitely it was more difficult. But since going back to work, it's kind of gotten back into gear. And then especially since I started doing Exodus 90, it's definitely, it's never an afterthought. So
Yeah, no kidding, right? Especially having an accountability buddy, your anchor. You're talking with that guy and you're like, yep, I sucked today. I did not do the right thing.
Yep, absolutely. How was your prayer life been through COVID and everything?
I'll say this. So I started Exodus 90 in late January. And so when we were going through and starting that process, this was right on the forefront of when the COVID stuff started popping up on the radar kind of here in the United States. But it really wasn't really becoming a big issue yet. So it was really interesting because I had about what would have amounted to maybe 6 weeks or so into the program before, well, let's see, the program itself it's 90 days. So 6 times 90 is a lot. That's not the number I'm looking for, but about halfway through, it's 45 days, right?
Yeah.
So 45 divided by 7 gets you to about 7 weeks. So what's kind of interesting about it is that you basically have a pre-Lent before Lent starts, which was interesting this year because it was like for Lent, I was like, I'm not giving up anything for Lent. I'm already Lenting. But it was interesting because Lent kind of started to coincide with some of the lockdown stuff. And even down here in Texas, we started working from home from my company. I want to say it was kind of mid-March-ish, something like that. So at that point, we were in Lent. I'd been doing Exodus 90. I kind of had a lot of things that were already lined up for me, which I thought was really great. So that actually worked out really nicely with my spiritual life. At the same time, Allie started doing a kind of a Ignatian spiritual exercise kind of retreat, kind of that was self-guided also. So I think that for her, that was a really awesome thing for us to be able to do together, really kind of together, in that we were both embracing some sort of a spiritual practice. And I thought that was also helpful. We wound up having a lot of good conversations, even about our infertility, as a result of us kind of both spiritually exploring that a little bit with our respective exercises that we had picked up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I liked about the Exodus 90 stuff, especially with COVID lockdown stuff happening, is that it gave me more structure and more kind of more discipline on the front end of it, where, it feels like there's a greater temptation now more than ever to really just become absorbed with social media. I think that there's a lot of voices out there that, I really, honest to goodness, even with kind of the things that we've seen with kind of I would say the severity, that's probably not the right word, the enthusiasm behind kind of some of the racial protests that we've seen recently, and some of the, I think, heightened rhetoric for and against it, is probably something attributed to the fact that we're also dialed in right now to, one, not really having a lot of genuine interactions with other people, and then two, being hyper focused on social media and really receiving a lot of our news from not really talking to other people so much as kind of receiving whatever is coming across the ticker tape. So what was really nice about especially the Exodus 90 stuff at the time is that it's, you're kind of insulated from all that. It really simplifies your life. And it becomes very dialed in on kind of the people immediately around you, how you're interacting with them, how you're interacting with your prayer life, how you're interacting with Jesus. So it's like I really haven't had a moment in my life that has been so spiritually informative, and so spiritually fertile is probably even a better word than spending the time that I have been in prayer in the mornings. And it's been just such a wealth, like a trove of grace that it's like, yeah, why haven't I been doing this?
Yeah.
Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I think I started actually doing Exodus 90 like right around when all the political unrest has started happening in the United States. So like not being on social media, like I've been kind of in the dark on some of the things just because like the interactions with other people are kind of cut off a little bit. But it's also like made me reflect on my personal life instead of everything else going on in the world.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. It's certainly a blessing to be able to kind of step away from some of, like, I think our faith is really simple. It's like, Jesus boiled it all down into 2 sacraments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, There we go. There's the gospel right there. And how wonderful is it to be able to, when you enter into prayer and you give that time to God and you contextualize your life within that construct, it's like, it just makes things so much easier. So let me ask you this. So given what's been going on with COVID and everything else, and maybe this isn't, well, let's just ask. So with respect to COVID, how has that changed the dynamics of how you're relating to your wife? Especially like if there's something specific with infertility, even like, have you had more conversations with her with it? Has it been something that's been further out of mind as there's like a bigger set of issues going on, or what does that look like?
Let me think. I think we've definitely had more discussions because we spent more just like close time together. But also we've taken a break for like the past year and a half as far as like infertility treatments go. And I think,
what's that been like, by the way? How did you come to that decision?
I think I don't remember the exact medicine that Stacy was on. She could tell you exactly. But I think it was very difficult to take a break. I would say just offering everything up to Christ, and accepting where we were in our lives. I think for the past year and a half, it's really helped us reflect mostly on like the things in our lives that we do have. Let me think.
So when you say like the things in your life that you do have, what does that look like?
I would say, especially getting to spend more time with my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
And me and Stacy both have 4 or 5 godchildren.
That's awesome.
So it's very awesome having this spiritual fatherhood that I'm able to pass along.
So do you get to like
nice,
see your godchildren frequently? Are you kind of an active part of their lives?
yeah, we see, let me think. Oh, yeah, we see them decently often. It's kind of hard to think about it because with COVID, we haven't really
Yeah.
seen a ton of people.
Sure.
It hasn't been that long, but it seems like it has been. But I think it was definitely nice to take a break and kind of realign ourselves. Because infertility treatments can kind of seem like an out of control car, and you kind of start swerving, and emotions are very much tied up into it.
Yeah.
Because it's very emotional and deep topic to talk about. And like kind of, slowing the car down is taking a break and kind of realigning yourself to the road and the path that you're on. And I think, I don't know, it's a difficult question. I think to even talk about myself.
Yeah.
We found out Stacy's infertility struggles about a year into our marriage. So
Did you?
yeah.
Yeah. How long did it take y'all to kind of come to terms with that? What did that look like?
I still think we're still trying to come to terms with it. I think it's always a constant struggle and battle.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely better days. And then there's definitely some days that are a struggle. You kind of get in this vicious cycle of, every month, end of the month comes and, it's the same thing over and over again. But I think it really was like under a microscope of when we were doing the infertility treatments and really, focusing in on what was going on. But I think taking a step back and, refocusing ourselves has definitely helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because it can be very difficult just to have that moment of, oh, this could be the month, and then it doesn't happen. So
yeah,
I think it's all adjustment.
I can certainly relate to that. What I think is really interesting too, the more that Allie and me, for example, the more we've been looking at some of the different infertility implications, you start realizing there's like a million different stories out there. There's a million different ways that people interact with infertility in general. I think as guys, it's kind of it's a little bit of a different situation because clearly a lot of it kind of winds up being a function of, I think as guys, it's not as ingrained in our nature to accept life and to nurture life as it is for women. Just,
yeah.
It's not so much a part of what it is to be a male. So as a husband, there's a lot of patience. There's a lot of support that you're providing for your wife as she's kind of going through it. You're in it with her. You're feeling what she's feeling, but you're not feeling it the same way that she is. And then you start looking at the medical side of things, and there are so many different possibilities out there for treatments and complications and surgeries and and depending on which flavor you're kind of dealing with there's different likelihoods that things could or couldn't happen outside of treatment or any of this other stuff. And yeah, I think that, what I'm trying to say is that with most things that we deal with that are challenging, it feels like there's kind of this binary system, right? You're either going to have kids or you're not going to have kids. And you're kind of contextualizing your life within that construct. But with infertility, it's like varying degrees of, well, maybe we will, or maybe we won't. And depending on what you're dealing with, there's different levels of loss. There's different levels of coming to grips kind of with what the situation is. It's just such a nuanced and challenging situation that is so dynamic depending on the people that you're dealing with and where you find yourself, that it just requires a lot of grace, I think, to kind of navigate those waters.
Yeah, it's just totally different. I think even our perspectives are totally different.
Yeah.
I think women's and men's infertility, like even though they're very much the same, they do have different aspects. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but I try my best to support my wife and everything she's going through.
Yeah.
Definitely just, I think if you have a spouse that's struggling with infertility or just a friend, the best thing you can do is listen. And it's not, listen to what they say and then, be like, well, you could do this or you could do this, or like, have you thought about praying more? I would say just listening to your friend that's struggling with infertility. Because you have no idea what they're going through. And they just want someone to know the struggles they're going through. I don't know. I would say just listening is huge.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. It's a really, it sounds trite. It sounds simple, maybe too simple, but yeah, what more can you do?
Yeah.
With respect to fertility, we kind of think that there's kind of this end game within marriage to get to children. I think I see this a lot within Catholic culture, right? And maybe you can speak to this too. You've worked with some youth ministry stuff and with kids. Have you noticed whether or not the topic of infertility even really comes up with kids whenever they're looking at dating or marriage, or you're talking about any of that? Does it enter the conversation like at all that you've seen?
To be honest, I don't really think so. I think at least growing up, especially me and Stacy first started dating, we never really had discussions of like, will we be able to have children? It was always about how many children will we have.
Yeah, right? Me too.
And I feel like even in like the youth group programs, it was never really brought up of like that's such a touchy of subject. Because is high school too young to talk about those things? But then like there's this disconnect of you go to college and then like it's still not discussed there. And then it just never actually happens. So I feel like that was difficult because nobody ever prepares you for, hey, you might have struggles with having kids at first.
Yeah. Yeah. What about your marriage prep program? Like, did you guys spend any substantial amount of time talking about whether or not you might or might not have kids?
I would say it was touched on, but it was very, very brief.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was ever like focused on. But we definitely we did a lot of the natural family planning classes. If you know what that is.
Is yours any good? Well, I don't. I don't want to get people in trouble over here in Dallas. I feel like ours could have been stronger.
Ours was very good.
Was it?
Yes, ours was phenomenal. They started teaching some of the high school kids more about NFP, and it really just helps them learn more spiritually about what goes on. And even some of the gentlemen, they taught them. And even during like our youth group meetings, we would talk about natural family planning as part of theology of the body.
Yeah. So I guess what's interesting is that, I mean, you look at the statistics these days and it seems like, I think I'd have to actually go back and look at it. I'm going to throw out a colloquial number here, but as I recall it, the number that I've heard thrown around is like 90% of Catholic couples use contraception, something to that effect, which, it's not consistent with our church teachings. And, I think it's interesting because as a Catholic experiencing infertility, you kind of hear those numbers and you're just kind of like, oh, people don't get what they have the possibility for. But it feels like even the way that NFP was taught, or broached, when the subject of it was broached in the classroom format for marriage prep that I went through, it was kind of like this is either going to be Catholic contraception or this is how you have lots of kids. And it wasn't really framed in the standpoint of, or from the standpoint of, kind of within a broader discussion about what even sex means within your marriage, and what that is a sign of. Like, if we could have spent a little bit more time theologically kind of breaking apart what that is, I think that would have been a welcome start to your marriage. So that, because I mean, I think that even within marriages, when you're looking at infertility, what are we taught with theology of the body for what a marriage is supposed to be like free, total, and fruitful, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're seeing those things, and it's like, well, it seems like fruitful's out now. So what does it even mean to come together as husband and wife? Like how do you redeem that? Like there's so much nuance to what it is to be dealing with infertility within a marriage. So I'll say this. How about this? With Exodus 90, there's a lot of emphasis on discipline. Have you found that to be helpful?
I would say the discipline has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Just aligning the discipline of, the simpler things in my life has definitely helped me see more of the fruits that I do have in my life. You were kind of saying earlier about, there's the three parts of a marriage, and the fruitfulness you said kind of, like, well, what's the point now? We kind of lost the fruitfulness. But I think it can also be very fruitful just to build a relationship with your wife. Your ultimate goal is to get your spouse to heaven, and then it is to get your children to heaven, God willing. But it definitely helps me focus more on getting my wife to heaven, and practicing those disciplines in Exodus 90. It helps me stay more disciplined in other parts of my life, to make my wife's burden less.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way of contextualizing how your prayer life can really impact the way that you're relating to your wife. I've found also that when you spend more time in prayer, you become more like Jesus, right? It's like you spend time with him, you start to know him better. He becomes less of an abstraction and more like a real person. And when you become more like Jesus in terms of relating to other people, then it's easier to love them. It's easier to, and especially, there's nothing more important in your life than your marriage. You said you and Stacy were high school sweethearts, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's fantastic. Like, I don't think you even hear that story very frequently, but like, what a blessing it is to have this person that you've known for so long to be the woman that you're walking with through the rest of your life.
So we actually started dating over 10 years ago. So we've known each other for a long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you celebrate like your first date anniversary?
I don't believe we do. It's January 8th, 7th or 8th.
Wow, you remember.
It's so close to like Christmas and New Year's and all those holidays that, it kind of gets caught up in the madness. So, but I believe it is either the 7th or the 8th.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, well, I'm gonna pivot back to discipline here for 2 seconds, because I would say that, especially as a husband, as a man, what I love about emphasizing discipline is that it just feels like the right thing to do as a guy, right? It's like, you want to get stronger, you got to get out, you got to hit the gym, or you got to commit yourself to going to run, you got to commit yourself to doing X, Y, or Z. And I feel like a lot of us are kind of check the box kind of guys, but I feel like it's easier as a guy to be a check the box kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of compartmentalize stuff. So being able to, have you found any sort of specific freedom, you might say, I guess, in this embracing kind of the ascetic practices, and kind of joining that together with your prayer life and your marriage?
I've, for a while, I got really into running and exercising. And I think just exercising and making yourself physically more fit, and growing in that way, it makes you feel better about, mixing in spirituality and prayer too. Kind of the aspect of like, if you get everything clicking together, it's easier. But if you're really good at prayer, but then like you sit on the couch all day and you don't exercise, like how great is that? Like just kind of getting everything working together. So me and Stacy like going on walks at night together. And that's kind of where we have some of those fruitful discussions.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like every night we know that we're probably going to go on a walk. So we have the discipline of, that's time we can set together to, actually unwind throughout the day and talk about anything we were struggling with.
Man, I'll piggyback on that because I feel like, especially with the COVID stuff, it's hard to make time to actually spend dedicated time with your wife. I have felt this particularly with respect to, I've been working at home for the past 3 months. So I've seen my wife more over the past 3 months than I have probably through the rest of my marriage combined. It almost feels like that anyway. That's probably not true, but it feels that it kind of feels that way. But what's funny is that when you're around somebody so much, it feels like it's difficult to actually place your like it's hard to have a date. It's hard to actually make time and be like, hey, we're spending time together, and it's going to be about us. It's not going to be just like you and me sitting here just shooting the breeze on X, Y, and Z. It's hard to kind of shake things up a little bit.
That's why I feel like when COVID first hit and I went into quarantine, that's what made it so difficult with my spirituality. Is like we kind of got stuck in this broken record of this is the same thing. How do we like spice things up? Like we can't go out to dinner.
Right.
We can't see a movie. Like let's wake up. Let's work. Let's maybe go on a walk. And then you kind of like, oh, well, I guess we're bored. I guess we'll, sit down and watch some TV. So you start forming bad habits.
Well, I will say this. Allie and I don't have a TV. And that's been kind of a conscious decision. Yeah, when I moved back to Dallas, I went to school at the University of Texas. And after I got finished with school there, I moved back to Dallas. I've been here for about, coming up on 9 years is what it's going to be. Dallas is my home. I love this place. It's my city. It's mine.
Awesome.
Yeah, right. But as I've been here, I know my own weaknesses. I know my own struggles. And it's like when I got an apartment, I didn't have internet. I didn't have a television. And I didn't want it. It's like if I was going to need anything like that, I found a coffee shop. And that's where I went to do internet stuff, which was great. Made a lot of friends, had a lot of really great conversations, found my way to some really interesting discussion groups as a result of that, even just about theology and philosophy. Very indebted very grateful to God for putting the people in my life that he did at the time. But I've kind of at least maintained not having a television, which, as a millennial, I think there's probably more of us that are doing things like that these days. And with all the streaming services and everything else, there's ways to get around that anyway. But we don't subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of that stuff. So we don't really have that in our lives so much either. So what's kind of neat is that because we don't spend all of our time binge watching series and stuff like that, on occasion, one of the things we've been able to do through COVID is like, hey, tonight's a movie night. Let's watch a movie together. We do go on walks together too on occasion. We got a Labrador who needs basically insatiable amount of exercise, and if she doesn't get it, she lets you know that she's expecting it, and you're not doing your job.
Yeah, it could be. I know Texas has winters and it does get colder, but Fort Wayne, it's in Indiana, and during the winter it can get below zero, so you can't really even get outside.
Hey, we also have summer winter. Okay, it's like it becomes so hot that you have to stay inside, and then the air conditioner is blowing so hard that you need a jacket in the middle of summer.
Sounds very difficult.
You have no idea. You have no idea. No, I've heard stories of cold for long periods of time. There's things like people talking about snow blindness on roads and having to get stuck inside because of blizzards. Sounds terrible. I have no idea what any of this looks like. But I will say when it hits 110, that's a little bit of a different condition to have to work your way through too, which doesn't happen a lot. But when it does, it's just like, shut down, man. You're not going outside. No question.
I mean, I may be complaining a little bit, but also it's by choice. We could always move if we get tired of it. So.
Well, Texas definitely has space for you down here, Phil.
Okay. I don't think we're ever moving to Texas, but I appreciate the offer.
All right. I'm going to pretend like you just said that you'll consider that offer in the future. Anyway, well, Phil, we're kind of coming up on that 1 hour mark. I think this has been a really great conversation. Is there anything else that that you feel like is worth throwing out there, or anything you can think of?
I don't think so. I think we covered some pretty good topics. But I would definitely think if you're going to take anything out of this, is definitely if there's an aspect of your life that's struggling, as such as prayer, I would definitely think about, maybe looking into it. We talked a lot about Exodus 90. Like, if you really want to kickstart your prayer life and you have some buddies that you want to do it with, it's a great thing to do. But also just like opening up the Bible and just reading a little bit. Or, if you find this podcast, maybe listen to another podcast. You mentioned Father Mike Schmitz, a lot of awesome videos. So I would definitely say, like, if you take anything out of this, it's definitely try to increase your prayer life, because it definitely will help your marriage, and it'll definitely help you as you go through this battle of infertility.
Man, that's awesome. That's right on point. And yeah, to just add a little bit more onto that too, like the beauty of our Catholic faith is that there's no dearth of expression of spirituality out there. You can look to any number of the saints. You can read the lives of the saints. You can meditate on the rosary. You can, go on walks and just experience God in nature, kind of like the lens of St. Francis, or you can do some spiritual exercises with St. Ignatius of Loyola, some Lectio Divina. It's like there's so many avenues out there, and there's something for everybody, because Jesus wants to be in a relationship with you, and he wants to lead you and your wife to heaven. What a wonderful gift it is to have that. So parting idea, if you would, Phil, give me one thing that you and Stacy are viewing as a blessing in your life right now.
I would definitely say the state of Indiana is almost opened back up with everything with COVID. And it's been such a blessing just to be able to see some of our friends and really spend time with them.
That's awesome.
Because it's very important to have friends that know what you're going through, because they can kind of help you carry that burden a little bit. So I would definitely say the biggest blessing we have is friends.
That's awesome, Phil. Well, I want to thank you for joining me in this podcast. Thank you for sharing everything that you have. You're a wonderful blessing to the ministry, and we're happy to have you on the team. I'm personally excited about it and look forward to getting to visit with you some more in the future.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
All right. You too, Phil.